Welcome to the first video in this tutorial series. In this video we're going to discuss creating our first program in displaying output. But before we get there, I want to briefly discuss the organization system in Java. The reason being is because if you're using a compiler such as Eclipse or Visual Studios, you do have to know how the organization system works. So let's imagine a library. If a library wasn't organized and instead had all its books in one large shelf, it would be very difficult to find the book you're looking for. And it's very similar with Java. If all the programs you wanted were all in one big folder, it would be very difficult to find the program you're looking for. So Java has an organization system that is very similar to how a library is organized. So for a library, we have the library as a whole, and then you have different libraries that can store different selections of books. But for the most part, everything you're going to need is in that one library. And if it's not, you go to a different library. Now in that library, you have bookshelves. You have bookshelves, and each bookshelf is separated based on a characteristic such as genre. For example, this one might be non-fiction, while the other one might be fiction. Now inside those bookshelves, now you have your books, the individual books that you can go through under that genre. And Java is very similar. These individual books can be thought of as your programs. And in Java, this is called your class. Programs are called your class. Now, a bunch of programs or a bunch of classes come together to form your bookshelf, or as it's called, a package. And then your packages come together to form your library, and it's called a library in Java as well. So as a quick summary, we have our class, aka our program, with its code. And once we have a bunch of programs that we can group together, we'll group them under a package. And now this package can be grouped with other packages of different types, different sizes, that do different things, and they'll come under the big umbrella that is the library. So Java has its own library. Now, for example, there can be different libraries. There can be a completely different library. For example, this library might be in order to program a robot. So with your motors and sensors and whatnot, right? So you can have different libraries that can specialize in different things. And the reason I mentioned this is, like I said earlier, you do have to worry about this when we get into editing Java compilers such as Eclipse and Visual Studios. You do have to organize your classes based on their packages. And if you're trying to navigate through a program, it's going to be organized through libraries and packages. So it's good to understand the terminology involved. Now I'm going to open up BlueJ. The reason I use BlueJ is because it removes most of the confusion of creating your projects and libraries and packages to make your class. It's very simple to create a class in BlueJ. So if you're using a different compiler or a different IDE, you can look up online for a tutorial on how to create a class in your specific IDE. Now, if you're using BlueJ and you see this grayed out and you don't see the option to press new class, then what you can do is you need to press new project. You need to create a new project. Once you have created your new project, you press new class and you give your class name. Now there are rules for naming your class, your program. For now, only use letters and have the first letter of your program capitalized, as it's good practice. So hello world, you cannot have spaces in your program. So I'm going to call this our hello world program. press OK, and I will open it up. It looks like a mess, it looks like a lot to take in, but all of this is just example code. This very portion on the top is just a description of your program. You can fill it in with whatever you want in between here. It's not necessary. And then everything here you see is example code that can be removed. Everything between these two brackets can be removed. Now we have our class. Now we're going to make the main driver for our program. This is what's going to run when we run our program. So we're going to type public static void main, open up a pair of parentheses, and then inside those parentheses type string with a capital S space args, and then after the args we're going to put in a pair of square brackets. After that we are going to put in a pair of curly brackets. Now something nice about Java is that the white spaces don't matter, which means I can have as many spaces or enters in between these two as I want. I can have everything on one line if I want, but it makes programming very hard to read. So as a good practice in programming, everything should be indented. So as you can see here, we have the public static void main, which is indented within the hello world just to make things a little easier to read. Now we want to print out text. How do we do that? Well, we type in the following statement: system dot out dot print, and then we open up a pair of parentheses, and then we put a semicolon at the end. Semicolon indicates the end of the instructions. Now inside these parentheses, we will put in double quotes. Double quotes means we're dealing with text. We want to print out something. And then in those double quotes, we can type out what we want. Hello world. Now if I compile it, compiling will go through the program, make sure there's no errors. And then we run our program. To run your program, you right click on your class and you press the void main string args that pops up. At least this is for BlueJ. If you're using a different compiler or editor, you're going to have to look up how to run a program in your specific IDE. Once we press void main string args and we press OK, our program runs. Now we can see here that we have printed hello world to our console. Now let's print on a separate line. Now in order to avoid going back and forth between different tabs, I'm going to put everything in a nice little format like this. So now I want to print, this is my first program, or my first program. So I'll copy and paste the same instructions and I will type my first program. Now I compile it and run it, and when you run your program, I forgot to mention, is you press this void main string args right here. This is your main loop. So this is why we typed it out, so we can run it through this command. So just press OK, and then it printed out hello world in my first program, but it printed it out on the same line, which is not what I intended. Why did it print out on the same line? Well, that's because after it printed out hello world, the cursor stayed at the end of the text. It was never told to go to a new line. So when I come again and I do system.out print my first program, it's going to continue off where that cursor left off at. So if I go here and I type hello world, this is what the first statement does. And the cursor stays at the end of the text. So when it comes back to print my first program, it continues printing my first program. Now if I wanted a space in between them, I would have to put a space in front of my. But I don't want a space, I want to go on a new line. So how do I tell the cursor that I want to press enter? Well, we use a different command. Instead of using system.out.print, we use system.out.println or print line. Now what this tells the compiler is after I print out this text, I want you to move the cursor onto the new line. I want you to basically press enter so you can move the cursor onto the new line. So after it prints hello world, the cursor is over here, but then it sees it's println, so the cursor is going to move to the new line in order to print out my first program. And if we compile and we run our program, we'll see that that's exactly what happens. Now notice I didn't have to put a print line at the next print statement because I'm not printing anything afterwards. However, if I were to once again repeat this command, this new line of text will continue off where the cursor left off, which is going to be right here. It's going to continue on the same line. So if I wanted to go on a new line, I will use println. Now you can use println on the end, on the last print statement. It won't do anything. If it will print out the exact same result, except that the cursor is just going to end up one line below, which is not something that you see as a user. So if I compile this and I run it, we see it will print out the exact same. Now something I want to mention. Now what happens if I want to print out quotation marks, for example? Well, let's try it out. So hello world. This is a quotation mark. And remember, I accidentally deleted the quotation mark at the end. Remember, the text has to be enclosed in a pair of quotation marks. So this is a quotation mark. These quotes aren't part of the text, so I have to put the quotation mark on the inside. So this is a quotation mark, quotation mark. Now, if you notice, I get an error. Why? Because the program doesn't know that I want this quotation mark to mean text that I want to print out rather than code. So what the compiler sees is he sees, okay, here's a quotation mark, and then you're closing off the text. He sees it as a pair of quotation marks, and then he sees you have this lone quotation mark by itself, and that's no good. So instead what we have to do is we need to tell the compiler, okay, I don't want you to treat this quotation mark as instructions, as code. I want you to treat it as text that I want to be printed. And the way I do that is using the escape character or the backslash. The backslash is found right above the enter key. That's that symbol. Now what the backslash basically does is it says the character that comes next, I want you to treat it as text to be printed. Right? So this will print out one character. It's not going to print out the backslash. It will only print out the quotation mark. And we can see here we get our quotation mark. Now there are three main characters that need the backslash in order to work, in order to be printed. The double quotes, single quotes, and the backslash itself. So if I wanted to print out a backslash, I would do backslash, the first backslash, which means the escape character, and then I would put another backslash, which means, which is the character I want to print. And if I compile and run this, we'll see that we print out a single backslash. Now, escape characters aren't only used for these three cases. We have \n and \t, for example, which are the most common ones. There are a list of other ones, but these are the most common ones we'll be using, if at all. Now, what \n does? Well, \n doesn't mean print out n, because I can print out n normally. I don't need a backslash for that. What \n means, it's a special instruction. I want you to do something special. And what is that special thing? Well, it's go to a new line. The \n is what's called the new line character. And whenever the program sees a \n in a text, it's going to move the cursor onto the new line immediately. It's not going to wait till after it prints out the text like system.out.println. It's going to move on to the next line immediately. And the \t is the tab character. It does the equivalent of pressing tab, and it moves your text. So for example, if I wanted to print out this backslash on a new line, well, what I would have to do is over here, I would have to type in \n. And \n will go to a new line. You could do the same thing using system.out.printlines and prints, but that would require more code. So \n is a quick way to move on to the new line. And as you can see, we have our backslash on a new line. Now there is a space in front of it that I don't want, and that's because I have a space over here at the text. So I have to get rid of that space, and then if I compile and I run it, we'll see that the space is removed. The last thing I wanted to touch up on is comments. Comments are a way for you as a programmer to document your code in order to put down your thoughts, so when you come back to your code, whether it be in a few hours, a few days, or weeks, months, however long, that you know what your code is doing in case you forget. Because it's very easy to forget what you intended your code to do. So the way we dictate that we want to comment something is we put a // Now this // tells Java, okay, whatever comes next on this line only is not going to be treated as code, is going to be treated as a comment. This is not code for you to run, rather it is text for me to document my code. So I can say printing out text. This is not a function for Java, it's not a command, it's just text for me to understand. And this is called a single line comment because it's anything on that line. If I go to the next line, you can see that it's no longer a comment, it's just code. Now, if I want more than one line, it will be pretty tedious in order to have to put // for every comment I want to do. So there's another thing, which is multi-line comments. So we open up a // and then we put an asterisk. And then in order to close it, we put another / and asterisk, an asterisk and a /. So it's like a pair. And you can see that BlueJ automatically completed it for me, but you can see that it's a pair. And anything in between these lines will be treated as a comment, as long as you stay within these two brackets, I guess. So that is the basics of printing out text in Java, and this is our first program that we made. As a practice, try creating programs to make these three outputs. The first program for practice is to print out a diamond formation with asterisks or whatever you want. And you can make the diamond as big as you want. So get practice creating a diamond formation. The second thing is print out this text, word for word how it is, with the quotation marks and the \. So print out this text how it is on the console, so it appears here. And the last thing is take an acronym and print out each letter with its corresponding letter. For example, the acronym FRC. The F is made out of F's, the R is made out of R's, and the C is made out of C's. Get practice with these three programs, familiarize yourself with the difference between system.out.print and system.out.println, and practice using the different escape characters. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.